Over the years, everyone's like, wow, how do you look like that? How is your skin like that? Why do you look like you're aging backwards? All these different things. And I'm like, peptides, man. But people don't get it.
Let's say you've had, as a young child, you had a lot of ear infections and you were treated with multiple antibiotics. Well, those things over time, they lead to some changes.
The first time I ever took peptides, because of my age, I was like, I really do not want to injure myself while I'm doing this. How far back can the clock be turned?
Like, I'm 62. Can my cell function in a metabolic way the same as when I was in my 20s? Can my immune system function that way? Can my microbiome? Absolutely.
So there's just so much I want to get into with you. I don't know where to start.
Why don't we start with what is a peptide?
That's a good place to start, Randy. Let's go there.
We all care about this.
Right.
Yes.
Oldish, the show where age-old questions meet new-age answers. With your hosts, Randy Spelling, Brian Austin Green, and Sharna Burgess.
Erin Keyes, welcome to Oldish.
Hi.
It is so good to have you here for so many different reasons. So for those listening and watching, we know Erin because we've been connected through the world of peptides, through the godfather of peptides, Dr. William Seeds. And I've had so many people over the years. First of all, I recruited Brian into it because I was like, you absolutely must do this.
And I've done like lives, it's like injecting myself in all sorts of stuff. Like, I'm a big believer in them now.
Over the years, everyone's like, wow, how do you look like that? How is your skin like that? Why do you look like you're aging backwards? All these different things. And I'm like, peptides, man. But people don't get it. You know, they don't understand how unbelievably magical these things are. And I want to get into all of that with you, what they are, what they do, all the things we don't even know. But I think a big conversation that you can also speak on, and we touched on it with another one of our guests, is the Ozempic semaglutide, the way that everyone perceives it, the way it's been villainized, but truly there are some actual health benefits to it. So there's just so much I want to get into with you. I don't know where to start.
Why don't we start with what is a peptide?
That's a good place to start, Randy. Let's go there.
We all care about this.
Right.
Yes.
So true. It's a good question.
Yeah.
And after we put Ozempic in the water, we can break down those details.
Okay.
They're pretty important.
Okay. Perfect.
So peptides are just short chain amino acids.
Okay.
They mimic signaling molecules within the body. But more specifically, amino acids are the building blocks of peptides, the building blocks of proteins.
Peptides are naturally occurring in the body, right?
are.
We actually already have peptides running throughout our system.
Yes, and it is what proteins break down into. So
Got you.
That's a natural source of peptide. But all your food sources, plants, a number of your skincare products, collagen peptides, all of those things are peptides. But they're also a class of medication. So Randy and I were talking earlier, really the first commercial peptide was insulin. Ozempic is also a peptide, but there are just hundreds of them, and they can address a whole variety of healthcare issues or optimization pathways, which I'm sure we'll talk about in great detail.
Yes, we will. Okay, so does that... Look who we have with us.
Oh my goodness, there's the man himself.
The man, the myth, the
Dr.
legend.
Seeds.
Doc Seeds, there
Welcome
he is.
to Oldish.
Dude, I told you before, that is such a good beard. I'm so
And bow
glad that you
tie.
still have
Yeah.
it. It's so good. How have you been?
I've been well. How are you guys doing?
Great.
We're doing so good, and we're so excited to have you here, Doc. I love that you're with us. Obviously, I've known you for many, many years, and I love all the work that you do. You've educated me so much, but we want to educate our listeners on what peptides are, what they do, why they should have them, some of the ones that have been villainized a little bit in the media, like all of those things. We want to get into it with you. Erin was just explaining for us what a peptide is. But
we started just by breaking it down to like ground zero for people that don't understand, because they think, oh my, it's some sort of like it's some,
crazy
Like what
injection
Miriam
drug
was
that
talking
you're
about
doing.
yesterday,
Yeah.
right.
Right.
It sounded like, yeah.
Well, let's start. First of all, can you share your background, Erin? And then Dr. Seeds, could you share your background for the audience?
I was going to actually ask permission to introduce Doc because
Please.
Yeah.
I
Please.
get feedback from patients about how adorable it is, how excited I get to talk about Dr. Seeds.
Okay. Then let's do that.
Yes. So really quick, my background, I studied molecular biology. I have always worked in a health and wellness space. So worked in a cardiophysiology lab, turned that into a master's of public health, worked for a number of government agencies, putting together programs, evaluation plans, and epidemiological studies to evaluate programming within the healthcare space. I then went back to school actually and got an MBA so that I could focus on the strategy around, the business that is healthcare. And people have opinions on if healthcare is or is not, should or shouldn't be a business, but at the end of the day, when you're looking to run an effective program, you need to have those strategy, finance, and operational skills to deliver it well. So I had the honor of meeting Dr. Seeds at a time when I was feeling really disheartened about the healthcare system. Personally, I'm a type 1 diabetic. I have a number of chronic diseases, and I spent my career working and seeking to solve those problems. After meeting Doc was the first time I ever felt hope in healthcare. And I think that has radically shifted my perception of what we can do in the healthcare space. So, like I said, the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Seeds.
Yeah.
Yes.
Practicing orthopedic surgeon for many decades, has been using peptides in his practice for many decades as well. Often credited with really bringing peptides to the nation. He's founded a number of organizations that deliver care directly, such as Redox Medical Group, where we see patients now, a number of other telehealth platforms, EMRs, healthcare delivery services, rehab centers, and something that we are both very passionate, excited about, the Seed Scientific Research and Performance Institute, which teaches other clinicians how to deliver cellular medicine care. As well as really spearheading a lot of the research in the area. So this man is always, not a step ahead, but 10 to 15 steps ahead of where the most advanced, physicians and researchers really are. And I admire that he combines that great scientific detail with this, hope for the future. He's someone that I think can listen to an issue and not gaslight a patient. He can say, you know what, maybe this is clinical or subclinical, maybe it's not. And if it's not working for you, let's find a way to resolve that. And so being a part of his team is one of the most inspiring places that I've ever been. And I'm so excited to hear his perspective on all of this.
That's amazing.
And to learn a lot over the next few minutes.
I love that.
Doc, you're on.
No pressure.
What more is there to say? Tell us a little bit about you and why peptides.
I could just listen to that all day.
I know, right?
Stop it some more.
Then I won't be able to get through my door. My head won't fit. So. Well, that was a gracious introduction and a very robust introduction, I'd say, to our focus in cellular medicine. And actually, my passion has been there for the last 40 years in studying all of the biochemistry, the molecular biology, and the quantum physics, all the aspects that have to do with how a cell functions and how a cell can be, how we can respect a cell making its own decisions in making things go the right way. And that's kind of, I think people should understand that peptides are, we're finding out that peptides as signaling agents or receptors or enzymes, they can be lots of things, but they're natural. They're what the body has created to make communication between cells or inside a cell to make that happen. And it's all about communication in how a cell has to adapt to life every day. And what changes when we're injured or when we're sick or when we're stressed or when we have a virus or bacterial infection or things like that, it's the cell's ability not to adapt like it should to that situation. And it's all about communication. And so it was, it was well over 10 years ago when we started introducing this concept of peptides to help teach cellular medicine, because it was a way that people could latch on to something to understand a process. And it ended up turning out to be far beyond where I thought it would ever go, and how people would be interested in really learning more about these geeky mechanisms of a cell and why, and getting to root causes and answers so you can figure out problems. And that's what makes this so incredible, I think, is that you actually can think through problems. And that's, if you know how a cell functions, if you know how it communicates. And I'm just telling you right now, we just know a little bit. We know a little bit, and we know that there's so much more we have to learn. But knowing that little bit gives us an edge on helping a cell communicate and helping the communication get better so it can adapt better. And that's where we started off with injury and repair on the orthopedic side, where we could assure good repair, more anatomical repair, so reducing the problems with if somebody were to re-injure. Most of the time that happens because the tissue doesn't heal well and there's more scarring and fibrous tissue. If you can get that tissue to heal more anatomically, you're going to avoid those problems, especially if you can rehab them back to the state of where they were before. And in fact, sometimes as you take that approach, you find out that you're not only enhancing that aspect of recovery and repair, but you're enhancing all of their activity in recovery and repair with training and preparing for whatever sport or adaptive skill that cell has to be.
The first time I ever took peptides was when I was doing Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah.
And because of my age, I was like, I really do not want to injure myself while I'm doing this. And so Doc started me on a program of peptides, and it was shocking because I always tell people, it's not like all of a sudden I felt superhuman when I'd go and work and we would be training and dancing all day and I'd be doing these things. It was that I really noticed that my recovery, I'd wake up the next day and I'd feel fine. I didn't feel like, oh man, I'm really sore, or I don't know if I can move today, or I can do stuff. Like my body was just, the machine of it was working better. And that's because it's on a cellular level. The cells were doing what they're supposed to naturally do, right? I was just giving them a little extra.
How do the cells stop doing what they are naturally supposed to do? When does that happen?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. That's a question. It depends on what you've been doing to prepare the cell as you age. I mean, number one, aging has an influence on cellular function, on how the genes of the cell are messaging inside the cell particular transcription factors to make a protein that proteins and peptides then are supposed to get a specific messaging process out of that cell. That's kind of how it works. And as you age, you lose some of these aspects of how that messaging can occur. You have it's kind of this thing that happens. It's an accrual over time of how much stress the cell can handle, meaning environmental stressors, mental stressors. Let's say you've had, as a young child, you had a lot of ear infections and you were treated with multiple antibiotics. Well, those things over time, they lead to some changes that can catch up over time, where the microbiome changes, and then the microbiome has an influence on the immune system, and the immune system has an influence on metabolism, and they all have messaging aspects that are supposed to be synchronous and working together. Well, all of that can, over time, change. And that's why every disease state, every injury, every metabolic problem is always a little different for everyone, because it just depends when that cell tips and isn't able to adapt. And it has to do with genetics, it has to do with environmental influences, it has to do with nutritional influences, it has to do with sleep, it has to do with stressors, it has to do with physical activity. I mean, all of these things play a role in how that cell adapts.
How far can peptides turn the cell back, turn the life of it back? How far back can the clock be turned just in doing peptides and taking care of yourself that way? I mean, can you really repair a lot of issues that are going on with the body?
Oh, well, so it's not necessarily repairing, it's letting the cell be capable of doing what it can do in restoring signaling that is involved in repair and recovery.
So repairing itself, basically, the cells repairing the body.
Absolutely. And so, the question is, could I have a cell, if I'm in my I'm 62, can my cell function in a metabolic way the same as when I was in my 20s? Can my immune system function that way? Can my microbiome? Absolutely. If you have all the right signaling and you give the cell the same ability to adapt like it could when you were in your 20s, you absolutely can do that. And that's where I think people get a little lost in this world of looking for, they're looking for longevity. I hate that word. It's not longevity. It's what am I going to do to improve the cell's ability to adapt today and for me tomorrow, not 30 years from now, because you got to concentrate on every day making that cell adapt. And does that mean that'll help you live longer? Possibly, but it sure means that you're going to improve your functional life.
You'll live better.
Yeah, because everybody has a genetic clock. Everybody has that process of, we just don't know enough yet. Is that something that we are improving? Well, I certainly think it's possible, but my concentration is like, hey, when you're 80 or 90, I want you kicking ass like you were when you were 25 and 30. I want that same capability. And we're able to do that. I mean, that's happening. We have the capability to do that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I like when Doc talks about is how peptides really are multipliers of the hard work you're doing outside of the clinic. And so, like he was saying, how do you take also a youthful approach to how you're managing your body? Are you doing that strength and resistance training? Are you feeding yourself well? Not that many people do that particularly well at 25, but...
I don't do it particularly well at 50.
Yeah.
So,
we go in and out of being very good at it.
Yeah.
And I think, as Doc was saying, a lot of this is about resilience too. And so as we are aging, the environment within the cell will inherently change, and then we can manage to that. So the protocol that you start at age 30 is going to be different than the one that you maintain at 40, at 50, at 60, at 95, at 120.
So it's constantly evolving.
Exactly, because we're constantly evolving.
Right.
And our habits, our environments, our toxins, our exposures, those are all different. And so when we're talking about how do you make a choice to move into the peptide space, a lot of that, we treat so many different use cases, everything from neurodegenerative disorder to severe injury to immune issue, but also a great number of people who are just looking to optimize their lives and really reframe or explore how they show up in the world. And so it's often a very beautiful journey to sit with a patient and watch them kind of become who they think that they are.
It's completely custom treatment too.
Exactly.
Like I noticed when I talk to Doc, he asked me, how are you feeling? What's going on? What are you hoping to improve? Like what? And I'll say to him like, I'm working out harder. So I want to make sure that my body can stand that. My joints are okay with it. hair, weight loss, like all these different things. So it's completely custom tailored. It's not like, you just take one peptide and it affects everything.
Right.
They all affect different
love
things.
that line of questioning too, because about a year ago, a doctor asked me, what do you want to be doing when you're 70? Have you thought about that? And I said, no, I haven't thought about that. And he said, well, think about that, come up with your answers, and we will try to reverse engineer what it is you're doing, how you're strengthening.
Plan.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that line of questioning is so helpful. What is important to you? How do you want to feel? How do you want to live? What needs tweaking?
And the best thing you really can do to create a life that you want at 70 is to create that life for you now and then maintain it.
Right.
So why do you think so many people struggle with the now? Because
humanity, the eternal torture of being human.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of discipline, I think, involved in maintaining your own care and committing to it. So when you walk into the world and everything is bright flashing lights and, confusing messaging, and we all strive, I think most of us do not spend a sufficient amount of time sitting in our own bodies, thinking about who we want to be, and then showing up for
true.
ourselves in that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so when people talk about self-care, sometimes self-care is getting that massage. I love that. Sometimes self-care is going for a walk. Sometimes self-care is finding a peptide or a medication or taking your your depression medication or whatever it might be. There are so many ways to care for yourself, and working with a trusted team that can kind of reinforce or double click on how you become that person in your day-to-day life. The other thing that I think about a lot is prioritization. And so much of life, in my opinion, is about prioritizing what's important to you and making sure that you are prioritizing your health, how you take care of yourself, and building that into systems and structures that you can maintain across the day. And sometimes that's discipline. Sometimes that's just the easiest habit that you've stacked. But how do you create a life and a world and a system that reinforces who you want to be in it? And I think peptides are a great part of that. If there's help available, take it.
Right, totally.
Yes.
No judgment.
It's so hard to do. Like I find just in eating every day, like it's so hard for me to maintain healthy eating throughout the day, every single day, and be consistent with it, which is why for me, peptides and all of that, it's like, okay, well, at least I'm giving myself something.
It's a form of self-care,
Yeah,
right?
I'm trying to like repair the mistakes that I know I'm making every day, by
And it's interesting too, because I think, I hear people say a lot, I can't afford that, or that's not approachable. But when you start to look at their daily habits, they can afford the Starbucks 1 to 2 times a day, entertainment, certain things where one could look at that as
Being
that
sick
might
is
not
expensive
be
too.
Being sick is expensive, but also buying all the cheaper versions of things adds up to being just as expensive. Like going to CVS and buying all the shitty vitamins off
friend
the
of mine
shelf that
works
do
at
absolutely
Erewhon,
nothing for you.
And I saw him not too long ago there, and I was like, oh my God, the food's so expensive. And he was like, well, my mom always said, like, you either pay for it now or you're going to pay for it in
later.
the hospital later.
Yeah.
Like, so, and it's
right.
and-
Choose what to be consistent
Yeah,
about, because you're consistent
exactly.
about something, whether it's
Right.
a bad habit or a good habit.
Yeah.
Right.
Doc, I want to ask you, because we've talked about like cellular repair, right? And what peptides do and how they function within the body. But I think sometimes for people, myself included, that can be a conversation of like make-believe, because you're talking about things that I can't see, the cells. That's I didn't
wait till
grow
he
up.
talks about quantum physics.
Yeah. Wow. Like,
I'm here for it.
Give me a beat. But we talk about, I know for me personally, what has changed for me in our peptide regimes we've done, people would remember my James Hinchcliffe season. You got me back within 2 weeks from an MCL tear. I've never had an issue with it since. There are so many
about
things
that?
that you've done for me in my programs, and as well in like the anti-aging space, being on tour and feeling like Wonder Woman. But what is it? So we talk about what happens within the body, but what are the types of things that peptides can change? It's like they can make your skin get better, right? I think you've even mentioned to me things like Alzheimer's prevention and things like this. Like, what issues can people actually look to peptides for?
Might be quicker to talk about what they can't do.
Yeah.
when you're improving a cell's ability to make better decisions, then it hits everything. I mean, when a cell become more flexible in how it utilizes the carbohydrates, the fatty acids, the proteins that you put in your body, and it can utilize them appropriately and then actually use those in manipulating energy within the mitochondria, and how the mitochondria makes ATP and NAD, and how those factors are basically, they're the keys to controlling redox. And redox is basically keeping the cell in equilibrium. It's like you don't want too much, you don't want too little, you just want enough. And so that's what leads to healthier nails, healthier skin, better collagen, better elastin, better hair,
better sleep, right? All sorts of
better sleep. Yeah, well, working on the circadian clock mechanisms of improving sleep and improving the aspects of what the clock mechanisms are so important with, improving your microbiome. I mean, it has a place in every silo of medicine. It's why right now this surge of energy and understanding more about GLP-1s, these Ozempics and things that are out there right now, are the information is just overwhelming for people, because they've never seen an onslaught on one particular medication like this in the world. It's never happened before, besides maybe insulin, as that started out.
Right.
And that's because these GLP-1s have not, weight loss is a side effect. It's an excellent thing that can come about by improving cell efficiency, but there are so many areas where these GLP-1s, because you have GLP-1 receptors in microglial cells in the brain, you have GLP-1 receptors in bone, you have GLP-1 receptors in muscle. I mean, it goes on where these have such an incredible effect over time, and that's where all of the research is coming out that has been out there. I mean, we've been talking about this for 10 years. I mean, we've been using GLP-1s for well over 10 years.
I remember you talking to me about semaglutide for pregnancy, for fertility.
Yes, which is another area that's being heavily studied right now. In fact, in helping with improving some aspects of in vitro fertilization, but also working on improving fertility and so forth. So yeah, it's amazing where that information is now more accessible, and people are trying to learn more. But then there are people that bastardize it by reading an article or reading something that has no implication and construing it in a different way to scare the public about this. I mean, you're going to just continue to see amazing things about GLP-1s. I mean, it's like I said, it's been around for 10 years. The data on GLP-1s is just incredible in where it's gone to where now it's made its way into cardiovascular treatments and improving morbidity and mortality for people that have had heart attacks. I mean, it's really showing you the power of just one peptide. Now,
right.
It's just one peptide. Just imagine if we could put all of this effort into a lot of these peptides that have just as significant influence as the GLP-1s. They're just not recognized. And those are the things we work with, because you've got to be able to utilize these at the right time in the right place to go after the right pathways to help people work around problems to get the cell functioning before it can regain its appropriate mechanisms in making things happen. And so I think that's the amazing thing about peptides. It's more about how it works with the cell instead of telling the cell how to do something, which has been the wrong approach for forever.
Absolutely.
So now Ozempic is considered a peptide?
It is, yep. Semaglutide's the active.
yeah.
What long term? Not to go down like the Ozempic rabbit hole, because we can.
It's a fair question.
We can talk on that forever, but I'm curious what the long-term negative effects of a drug like Ozempic could be, or what people aren't doing that they should be doing while they're on it.
Is there a way to abuse it?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Should they be working out? Should they be doing things instead of just the injection and going, oh, hey, I'm seeing results? Because it seems like now that's what we're seeing is like, oh, the people that aren't going out and being active, now they're the negative effects of like in the face and
Muscle
And
loss.
that's, I think, a more specific question because, like Doc was saying, there are many use cases for a GLP-1 receptor agonist. So that one is very specifically focused on weight management, and there are many things that you can do for that. But as he referenced, this isn't a scenario. You're not going to use a peptide for a single symptom, a single outcome. What a peptide can do is modify that cellular environment that allows the body to act in the ways that it should. So like he was saying, works with the cell, works with the body to improve various sets of functions, tissues, organ systems, et cetera.
Right.
And so for GLP-1 receptor agonists, I think people believe that there is one prescribed protocol that a patient must follow, and that will address cardiovascular disease, that will address type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, there are some indications for now too, weight management, Alzheimer's prevention, and there are different approaches and different protocols for each of those. So kind of going back to your question of what are the things that you should be doing with a GLP-1 receptor agonist, whether that's semaglutide, tirzepatide, aka Ozempic, Mounjaro, Zepbound, Wegovy. Of course, and Doc, I don't mean to steal your thunder on this one, but we talk about this a lot, strength and resistance training, making sure you're monitoring your protein and your fiber intake, making sure that you're investing in the skills and the systems to go on and maintain those good habits. Of course, taking a look at a holistic approach. So one of the things that I love about working at Redox is it's not just semaglutide in the weight loss space. Sometimes that's, and Doc, I'll throw it over to you for this one, it's the gut microbiome or the anxiety that precedes that anxious eating, and how do we resolve some of those pieces as well. So it really has to be part of a holistic program.
It's the therapy side of it also. It's making sure that your mind is in the right
head,
space.
body, spirit.
Emotionally.
Can anxiety be helped with the microbiome? Because you talked about peptides for microbiome. So let's say I came to you and I said, I have some microbiome issues, which, in the last 10 years has been all the rage. Everyone does. There's leaky gut. There's all these things.
Yeah.
Right. I definitely do and have been working on that. So if I come to you and I say, there's some microbiome issues. I grew up on antibiotics 4 times a year into my 20s. I see environmental exposure, other exposures. How do you treat me?
All of this, all these issues with Ozempic and so forth, you have to be under the care of a physician, and a physician that follows you and that actually has a discussion with you to ask you how you got to this place, because you treat people differently with these processes, and it's just not Ozempic by itself. It's it's all other aspects of how you include the microbiome with this, how you work on, you find people that have had great anxiety that get into these issues, that's a stressor that works against issues. You have to have a discussion, and it starts there. Number 2, in talking about your microbiome issues, we look at it not just, again, metabolism affects immunity affects the microbiome. They all have some influence. When you look at the microbiome, the best step is always not getting stuck in the phylums of the microbiome, like the firmicutes or Bacteroides or Verunomicrobia or Proteobacteria or Actinobacteria, which are the top phylums that are involved. And people get caught up in those phylums and families and genuses of like, okay, what do I need to change? What probiotic do I need to change? That's just complete bullshit. You have to know what is the function of your microbiome, because everybody has a different microbiome, believe it or not. You can look at how it compares to a cohort of healthy people, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong with your microbiome until you can assess the functionality of that. And that means looking at sequencing the RNA metabolite, doing RNA analysis of the metabolites to look at the aspects of how functional is the microbiome. So you can look at all the small chain fatty acids, you can look at the polyamines, you can look at the antioxidant productions, you can look at the neurotransmitter productions, you can look at lactate production, you can look at B vitamin production. I could go on and on. Those are the things you look for to see how it's functional. Then you can work. It's again working with information to make real sense out of where is someone. So that's how we do things. We get to, the devil's always in the detail. The devil, and it's always focused on working with your patients. But I'm going to tell you, any of this is always hard work. There's no easy route. There's no easy answer. It's always hard work. And I love being on your show here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much for being here, Doc.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for stopping
You're
in.
the
I know
best.
you're a busy man. Go do what you got to do.
Go help people.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
See you in an hour.
We'll see you soon. Yeah.
I don't.
You've got Erin there. She can handle it all.
She can. She's amazing. It's, as much as I know about peptides, I've known Doc for so long. He starts saying words, and I'm like, I'm sorry, what now? What planet are we on? You spoke a different
German.
language.
Yeah, he started
It's
getting
so
into things,
much
and I was
to
like, okay,
understand
this is
and learn.
nappy time. No.
Yeah. My brain goes too
I followed
stressed,
some of
and I
it.
want to go sleep.
I could see looking at your face. I was like, oh, Randy knows exactly what he's talking about. So I'm just going to sit here and be the dum-dum and hold my oldish mug and drink some water.
What I wanted to ask Doc, but we didn't get to it, is, and you can totally, I'm sure you have your own stories, is for people to understand, what are some of your favorite or most miraculous things you've seen peptides do?
That is a great question. And, ask me tomorrow and I'll have a different answer.
Right, totally.
As of late, I've been extremely encouraged by a lot of the results we're having with Parkinson's treatment.
Wow.
So what I find really interesting, particularly at Redox Medical Group, is, we've really never done any marketing. And so all of this is referral based. And so we'll go through kind of swings of referrals where a Parkinson's patient has a great outcome and they bring all of their friends. And so we get to go on multiple journeys. We get to improve and optimize and refine our approaches to various disease sets or states. And so I think that one's been really interesting, watching people go from a place of hopelessness, like we were talking about before, into not only a place of hopefulness, but of function. And so there was a study recently that talked about, again, the GLP-1 receptor agonist and its impact on preventing further degradation from neurodegenerative disease, more specifically Parkinson's. So these disease states that there have historically not been successful treatment pathways for, we are now seeing possibilities for that. Myself included, actually. I mentioned I have type 1 diabetes, I had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, thyroid dysfunction, a whole set of things, and all of that is autoimmune related. And there is a lot of indication that, I will probably never not have type 1 diabetes, but we can very steadily reduce the impacts and the further damage or comorbidities on my body from that. So in many cases, it's less so that we see someone come back from a late stage disease, but it's so encouraging to me as more people are addressing health barriers or risk factors that they start early and they don't actually get to a point of dysfunction. That part, I think, it has been the most inspiring for me. So as many of us are, 30s, 40s, 50s, we're starting to see things have aches, pains, lower functionality. Test results are coming back and we have to address things that we never had to think about. That is the time to take action and really take your fate and your life in your own hands and not get to a point where we have to restore.
Until the termites have done too much damage to the wood. And you have to just completely replace it.
And it's more accessible than ever. We have more knowledge about this than ever. And I do truly believe that we are fundamentally shifting the trajectory of healthcare by approaching this in a prevention and optimization.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, how does one get peptides? Because I know there's a few different ways. There's prescription, there are supplement peptides that aren't as regulated, and then there's black market.
There is, yeah.
Right?
So we talk often about...
My favorite. black market. I'm just all about the gamble of it, like just send me a vial of
knows what
something
you're really
and we'll see
taking?
what happens. We'll see how I
all
feel.
labels.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about how if someone is interested in pursuing a peptide journey, make sure that you are going for quality. So that would include ensuring that you are sourcing your peptide. Well, first step, finding a practitioner who you trust, who is trained very specifically in this. There is not a residency program in peptides or cellular medicine. Sometimes it's classified as anti-aging, but really there are limited opportunities for training in the space, which is why there has been reduced access to it prior. Dr. Seeds did found a number of training institutes that allows clinicians to have that education. So finding a doctor that really is an expert in the space is huge. And then having and ensuring that that doctor is sourcing those peptides from a place that delivers that high quality. So
You don't like black market.
yeah, less so on the black
Devastating.
market, more on ensuring that your source of peptides is quality assured. So
Yeah.
looking at purity, potency, sterility testing. And there's a number of third-party testers that will do that. So we, for example, work with 503B certified compound pharmacies, which are audited and compliant with FDA regulation. And they do batch-specific testing to ensure that high-quality
Got you.
peptide is delivered every time.
So again, not to necessarily make this whole episode on the Ozempic or GLP-1s, is what we
It's
call
an
them?
important one, though. I understand why
but
it
it's
keeps
such
coming
a
back.
big conversation in the world, right? And you see people. You only showed me a photo the other day of Scott Disick, right, with what they call Ozempic face, and
What's that?
where he looked completely like he died 6 months ago, like he looked
gaunt.
gaunt. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Which,
Sorry, Scott, I didn't mean to
people-
say a terrible thing, but like.
People get that with weight loss. That's not necessarily related that's not caused by Ozempic itself.
Right.
It would be because of likely faster weight loss.
Well, it's
Right.
weight loss, and then it's not doing the other things to maintain
Strength
muscle
training,
and strength.
protein.
Yeah, and right, exactly.
There are people that talk about. I watched another podcast on it. Actually, it was Diary of a CEO. They had someone on there talking about it. But people talk about bowel paralyzation and things like that. Sounds
Gastroparesis.
terrifying. What is that? How does that happen?
So there are a number of risk factors that someone can take a look at, which is why you need to work with a literate physician
Right.
to make sure that you are a good fit for all medication that you are using. But a lot of the issue is really with overdosing
Right.
or having a mismatched dose for what you need. So each body, like Dr. Seeds was saying, is unique, and we're all, a unique constellation of characteristics that have to be treated in context of using something as simple as Ozempic. So what we want to do is do personalized dosing, giving someone the right medication at the right dose at the right time, and work with the body, not against it. So when you get to something that is oversuppression of the appetite, where someone's not eating sufficient protein, they're so fatigued they can't hit the gym, they can't live their life. We're doing this to feel better in the long run. Why would you feel terrible during it?
Right.
Right.
But B, when you get to that overdosing, you can put yourself into those other risk factors. So gastroparesis, more commonly one will see, hair loss or skin laxity or
Interesting.
those other factors.
Now, I've also heard from just in reading recently that one of the things that people don't know about Ozempic is that if you stop taking it, that your body then will go back to where it was before you started taking it.
That's
Is
what
that?
I've heard.
Yeah.
That you have to be on it for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's
Is
kind of
that
it's sort
true?
of a lifelong choice of like, okay, I'm going to take this
Forever.
this drug to maintain.
Is that the case?
We have a number of pathways that we'll see. So there is a pathway where people stay on it forever. And sometimes that's for weight management. And sometimes it's for, you talked about how Doc has mentioned Alzheimer's protection
Yes.
or prevention. Semaglutide at a lower dose even can be Alzheimer's protective. There's great cardiovascular benefit, fatty liver disease, kidney disease, osteoarthritis, anxiety and depression, actually. There's a whole bunch of use cases that this can support, again, often at that lower dose.
Right.
So some people do stay on it forever, maybe for weight management, maybe for those other ancillary effects. Some people will stay on and go to a low maintenance dose, and I think that's much of what I'm discussing.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to ask, like, if somebody is doing too much of it and then they have to kind of wean themselves off of it that way, do you then, instead of doing a complete break from it, you then go to a real low dose that becomes more of a maintenance thing and
we'll often
get somebody back to a healthier place?
The other aspect is you titrate up so as to not have those side effects like nausea, heartburn, constipation, etc. You also can then, if you want to exit use of the drug, you can titrate down. And so it's almost like, we talk about how this can suppress, give you 30% appetite suppression. And really what I want to reframe that as is 30% more control over what decisions you're making and what you're putting in your body. And so we can titrate that down almost like training wheels and help people build the habits that they can then maintain as they go off it.
Interesting.
But you can cascade that down, do the hard work to maintain those systems, structures, habits, and really getting to know the amount of calories or macronutrients your body needs at each of those steps. I was talking to a personal trainer several years ago now about how when someone goes through a weight loss process through physical fitness, you can very slowly increase someone's calories to mirror their basal metabolic rate. And we aren't approaching it in that capacity because with Ozempic right now as a nation, because people are illiterate again on how to maintain their weight and set up those systems.
Right.
Habits.
So true.
And that will also change over your lifespan.
And everyone wants the quick fix, right? I imagine so many people. I know someone in Australia, actually, and it's incredibly hard to get in Australia, it seems, or at least she struggles with it. She was doing like 50 units of it per injection, and that sounds to me incredibly high. The only peptide I went high on, that was my breast milk production one, like Thymulin, that worked very well for me. And then I know other people that are on like 5 and 10 units of it. What is an overdose and what is a maintenance dose?
Yep. It really depends on the concentration of that peptide.
So interesting.
When something is compounded, they can be made at various concentrations. So for semaglutide, the active ingredient in Ozempic, we have some concentrations which are 2 milligrams per milliliter, some are 5 milligrams per milliliter, some are 2.5 milligrams per milliliter.
Right.
And so you match the units to the ultimate dose you want. The typical range for something like semaglutide is 0.25 milligrams all the way up to 2.4 milligrams is the FDA-approved Ozempic range. We find that most people have a good response somewhere between 0.5 and 1.5 milligrams.
Yeah.
Frankly, what we often recommend is a slower weight loss process.
Totally.
It protects against, Ozempic face. It protects against muscle wastage. Took a long time to build that body how it is now. It's going to take a lot of time to go through a weight loss process too. So in that slower weight loss zone, we do see a lot of benefits. We see a lot of cardiovascular benefits and overall health and health span benefits as well. So if someone is willing to be patient and to get to know themselves and to be, really comfortable pushing their body through that process in all of the right ways, it's going to be a better experience across the board.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate hearing the part that it's still going to take work to do it the right way. Not just the magic pill, not just the quick fix, but holistically looking at what choices do you need to make.
That quick fix, though, is where it's at right now.
That's where it's at.
It literally seemed overnight. It was like I hadn't ever heard of Ozempic, and then all of a sudden everybody was on it.
And then everyone was skinny.
Everybody that had any sort of weight issues,
Hollywood
you
was
looked
skinny.
at it,
You were
and
like,
see pictures and you go, holy crap, how did that? And it was unbelievable, but I have to assume.
We were talking about this earlier too. I think when anything happens like this, so by 2030, GLP-1 receptor agonists will be the most prescribed drugs ever. That's incredible. But there's so much judgment that comes on this. So, when we talk about body shaming, I hear a lot of, pain from our patients being like, people judge me for being overweight. They also judge me for how I'm losing weight. And so people will judge you for being thin. They'll judge you for being, thicker. They'll judge you for using a GLP-1 receptor agonist. They'll judge you for not, and one of the things that Randy and I were talking about is I want to recenter this conversation about, hey, congratulations for taking charge of your fate and for planning to who you want to be at 70 and then making that now. And so if I think about theories of motivation, results are addicting and they are going to push us to how we can maintain those results. But realistically, if we can turn this Ozempic conversation into a narrative of falling back in love with yourself and how to care for yourself with intention, and this is a lever or a tool we have to show up how we want to in the world.
Right.
Like, what a journey that would be.
We just had we had Dave Asprey on, and so we were asking him about Ozempic too, because he's in so many parts of the space as well, and he made a very good point. He was like, listen, it's about your health. If you have a weight issue and Ozempic helps you kind of get through that, then I'm all for it. He was like, it can absolutely be abused. But he had a very positive sort of outlook on it of like, I think
it's
for the
hard
most
to argue
part,
with.
Yeah.
Like, the data's compelling.
Yeah. A lot of people like if it's bettering your health. Yeah.
From what I've heard and seen, and I think the reframe is just around health. It's not just losing weight.
For
I know
looks.
that is part of it.
Right.
And there is a vanity aspect that, let's face it, is important. When you look in the mirror and you like what you see, you improve as a mother, father, partner. You just
because you want to look in the mirror more. It becomes addicting to look in the mirror.
You feel better about yourself, but then it's the bigger conversation of health. What am I doing to maintain or improve my health at large?
Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
think that conversation, what you said, how do I fall in love with myself? How do I take charge of my health?
Yeah. Live your
plan
life
for being
like it's
70.
yours.
Yeah, totally. Do you think because of how this drug or this peptide skyrocketed and how it became so in demand and so expensive, I think, for so many people to get, that it's kind of on practitioners too, that maybe source it from a not so great place or do overprescribe it or allow people to go too far because there's money to be made in it?
Yeah.
Is there a big dark side to that too?
Absolutely.
It's one of the problems I would think is that
Huge
like
gold
it's
rush.
going to get worse and worse. The actual product itself is going, like the quality is going to continue to slide down because people want a more inexpensive way of having access to it.
Yeah, that's why you really do have to check your sources on it. And
trust a doctor.
exactly.
Yeah.
To that point, though, I do think that that's where many bodies will step in. So regulatory bodies or agencies, organizations, associations, et cetera, will actually be stewards of the industry. And so that's why I do like working with all the SSRP faculty to really drive home what does it mean to make a healthy decision about this. We're all doing the best we can with what we've got. And so I don't think it should ever be the responsibility of the patient to determine, is this pharmacy a high quality pharmacy?
Right, totally.
That does have to sit on the provider and the bodies that can vet that for the providers. As I mentioned, I have a degree in molecular biology. I know what the fuck I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
And I have to hire a team to go through those quality assurance processes.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so many layers to it.
Amazing. I have used so many with you. I just want to share with people what I've used over the years, and you can tell people what they do because I've tried, and it really, I'm pretty sure they think I'm speaking Chinese.
Like Doc was saying, I mean, they do a lot of things.
They do a lot of
We'd be here
things.
for a long time.
So we started off with a BPC and a CJC, ephemeral, which you've done. And they were for when I was on tour and recovering from injury. So they are tissue repair, right?
And CJC 1295 ephemerelin. It's a GHRP, GHRH, so growth hormone secretagogue.
We're back into the German side of this conversation.
You lost me at G.
The more time I spend with Doc, the more I speak like this.
Yeah.
Invite me back at some point and I'll just be incommunicado.
Yeah.
What I love about, and why I want to call that one out in particular, is particularly for us as we age, universal us, that supports muscle growth. It also supports collagen production and thereby muscle growth.
CJC,
ephemerelin. And there's a number of growth hormone secretagogues, so tesamorelin, sermorelin, et cetera. And I find that one extremely interesting as a use case for menopause or for aging as a whole, because with muscle growth, we can improve, insulin sensitivity. Muscle is the most insulin sensitive tissue in the body. I think there's becoming more of a followership around muscle as a tool to maintain your health, particularly for women. So I love that, in supporting skeletal muscle growth, we can reduce risk of osteopenia or osteoporosis. We can, reduce sarcopenia, which is muscle loss, and help. That's really kind of this number one indicator of mobility throughout the lifespan. So you're not just looking toned and feeling good. You're setting yourself up so that when you are 70, you're chasing around your grandkids and picking them up, or you're, taking a hike in Mount Kilimanjaro.
I need that now because it's 70.
I want him to have. I want to have another baby, and he's like, "I'm too old." I'm like, "No, you're not. More peptides, Doc. Let's go."
On it.
Yeah.
So we are going to continue this conversation over on our extra bonus segments, which is going to be on Patreon. But for everyone listening, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to continue talking with Erin about the peptides that I've taken, and we can tell people about them. We might play some fun games, do some fun things. But
Erin, is like one of the smartest
people.
women I
but
know.
also, I love your voice too. It's so melodic. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So if anyone does want to join in on the rest of this conversation, you can see us after the show.
We're going to put some links too to for people to get in touch with you and find out more about peptides and decide if it works for them.
Absolutely. And as always, guys, we love you so much. Please like and subscribe. It helps us more than you know. The more of you we get following along with us on this, the even better we get with it. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you over there at After the Show.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Hey, if you're going through something right now, if you need additional support, then please reach out to me at randyspelling.com/help or go to my Instagram at randyspelling. Thanks.